Balake? Where is Balake at?
My name's Blake.
Do you want to go to war, Balake? I'm for real. Ron.
Ron is here, everyone. Welcome back for more SPTV, where every day's a great day not to be in a cult. All right. Yesterday, I did a video with the latest update in the legal proceedings that Scientology has initiated against some LA-based protesters. Yesterday, one of the restraining orders that Scientology was seeking, Scientology officially lost that effort. They were ruled against the temporary restraining order that they had obtained. They were unable to convert that into a permanent restraining order. Now, and this was actually the first restraining order hearing that Scientology had brought and lost, because the other two that you might have seen me cover on my channel were actually restraining orders not brought by Scientology itself, although Scientology was almost certainly working behind the scenes. But it was brought by the owner of the restaurant La Poubelle, named Francois Coster. So on Friday, yesterday, it was the first time Scientology lost this effort, and they're most likely going to lose again on Monday. Now, after court got out yesterday, Streets LA texted me and he said, "Hey, it's actually it's newsworthy that Scientology's attorney Kendrick Moxon, during the proceedings, twice brought up this effort, this proposal, this new law that LA County Board of Supervisors," I might get the language on this wrong, but my guest who's about to join me is going to make sure I get it right, is proposing an ordinance that would restrict protesting outside of places of worship and also outside of certain medical facilities. Although this proposal is not specifically intended to protect Scientology from protesters, it is most certainly going to be the effect if this thing is enacted. Now, it's been a long time. It feels like it's been a long time since I've done a video with my lawyer friend, Zach. By the way, my lawyer friend, Zach, can also be your lawyer friend, Zach, and you can find him right here on YouTube at Your Lawyer Friend Zach. Let's bring him on and let's have a chat about this. Here he is, the man himself, my lawyer friend, Zach. How you doing? Are you frozen?
Having a little bit trouble hearing you, but good afternoon, Aaron.
Well, I don't want to shout into the mic, but
can you hear me?
What? I can hear you perfectly fine.
Okay, I've got you on a slight delay, but I think I can keep up. We're okay.
Okay, good. I won't speak too fast. Okay, so if I try to do any more of an intro on the proposed legislation, I run the risk of describing it incorrectly. What can you tell us about what's being proposed and what should we know about it?
So essentially what we're looking at is a type of restriction of the First Amendment. The First Amendment contains several components. The first is the freedom from and the freedom to religion. We call it the free exercise. And there's another one. But the big part that we're looking at is where in the First Amendment it says you have the right, the right of the people to peaceably assemble. Actually, the First Amendment never says the people have the right to protest. It says people have the right to peaceably assemble. That's essentially what we're dealing with here. The courts have long viewed protests, dating all the way back to the Tulsa race riots in the 1920s, and then the Civil Rights era and the Vietnam protests in the 1960s and the mid to late 1960s, early 1970s, that even though that may be a protest, it is still a type of public assembly. And so the way we look at the First Amendment, the first thing we have to do is make sure we're looking at it through the right lens. And that is that the First Amendment is designed to protect us as people and residents and citizens from government censorship. It is not designed to protect people from the Starbucks Christmas cup, because how dare Starbucks not say Merry Christmas, but instead put secular Christmas images such as snowflakes and Christmas trees. I see that every year around Christmas, somebody loses their mind over the Starbucks Christmas cup, and I just chuckle and say, my First Amendment rights are violated. It doesn't protect you from Starbucks. It protects you from the FBI or from Congress or from any other governmental entity or agency from coming after you for what you said, or from censoring your speech and determining what I say is okay because they agree with me, but what you say is not okay because they disagree with you. With that in mind, with that framework in mind, a lot of people have this misconception that it's universal. I can say what I want, where I want, in any manner that I want, and I'm protected. And that's just simply not true. We've all heard, hopefully you've all heard at least, the common mantra of you can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. And that's for the most part true, because that can incite violence. It can incite panic. People can become injured when trying to hurry out of a movie theater. People may call the fire department and activate emergency response when it's not appropriate. But that's not a completely true statement, because you can yell fire in a crowded movie theater, but the building needs to be on fire, or you need to see smoke or have some other indication that there's actually a fire. Provided those conditions are met, then there's nothing wrong with that. So what LA County or LA LA City Board of Supervisors, LA County Board of Supervisors, I think it was actually, what they're attempting to do here, it's the LA government's a bit strange, just because there's so many people and so many municipalities, and anyway, it's some layers to it. But what they're attempting to do is something that a lot of jurisdictions have done, and that is to create certain limits on the right to protest. They are not saying you can't protest. What they are saying is there are restrictions on your right to protest. And the Supreme Court has been fairly active in this in the last 50 years or so. And there are certain restrictions that are allowed and certain restrictions that aren't. And for example, if I want to protest, the city can make me take out a permit. If it's a large enough group, if your protest is going to be, and I'm making a number up, say more than 50 people, you have to get a permit from the city, because the city needs to know where there's going to be lots of people standing on the streets and on the sidewalks. Because when the homeowners who don't know what's going on call and say, oh my gosh, there's a gang of people, they can say, no, there's a protest or there's a demonstration. They may require that you take out insurance to fix any public property that you damage during your protest, even if you don't intend it to be violent. Maybe somebody misbehaves. They can require that you hire security, generally city police officers, because the city should not be in the business of paying overtime to support my particular position. So they can make me pay for that police officer's time. Because we do know statistically, when police are present, the peace does tend to be upheld a little better than if it's just a bunch of crazy people hucking bottles at each other. Like, go back to the LA riots in the 90s following the Rodney King verdict. Not that I'm taking a position on that. But then also what we're seeing specifically here in the proposed legislation is, and that's what it is, just legislation at the city level or county level. What they're looking at doing is creating, they call it a bubble zone. We often see these called buffer zones. This became very famous in cases like abortion clinics. Anti-abortion advocates would go and protest outside the doors of abortion clinics, saying you should not go in there, ma'am or sir, and seek the services of this agency, this business. Well, abortion clinics, of course, perform that particular procedure, but a lot of them also provide regular and routine gynecological care to women. They provide STD testing. They provide other medical services above and beyond termination procedures. So the courts have long held that if you're going to this particular facility to receive any type of service, whether it's termination or other medical service, you have the right to not be accosted when you walk in. But the anti-abortion advocates have the right to stand there and spread their message. What they can't do is get in your face. They can't put their hands on you. They cannot physically obstruct you from entering. Likewise, the pro-abortion community you cannot be forced to receive a pamphlet from them. They may be trying to hand you a pamphlet that talks about your rights as a woman or whatever. You can't be forced to receive their information either. They can be there and it can be available, but you don't have to accept it. And that's a version of what we're looking at. The other reason that and I don't know if they're going to try to argue this or not, but the lawyer in me says the other reason that those exist and that the Supreme Court has said those are okay is for safety. If I'm blocking all of the exits and that building were to catch on fire, or were to have an active shooter, or to have some other emergency, and people can't get out because I'm in the way, people will absolutely get injured or killed in that scenario. And so the exits and the entrances need to have a clear path, both for people to come out and first responders to go in. Right. So that's sort of the public safety justification for that particular provision. It's interesting. You sent me some stuff ahead of time to research, and the big key word here is unincorporated Los Angeles County.
That's what I would like to
And
understand better.
right. So unincorporated Los Angeles County is, I'm going to use the term a definition by elimination.
Hmm.
It is all of that part of LA County that is not incorporated. And incorporated is a very specific term that means it is an organized city or town that has a formal governance, a mayor or a city manager and a city council or a town council. In the Northeast, they often call them town selectmen or aldermen, the alderman board, something like that. But there are lots of people who live in housing additions or even a place where there may be a couple of businesses, a convenience store or maybe a restaurant and a dry goods store of some sort or a Dollar General. And there, 50 or 60 people living in a little community, but it's unofficial. They just all happen to live there. There's no governance, there's no police force, there's no mayor, there's no trash service, nothing like that. So, best I can tell, this particular provision is only going to affect those in unincorporated Los Angeles County. LA County is an extremely large county in terms of square mileage, but there's not a lot of it that is unincorporated. A lot of people, if you're not familiar with LA, they think of LA as just this massive area. While LA has a very large population, it's one of something like 80 cities and 80 towns in Los Angeles County.
Mm. Can I jump in with, I guess you helped me understand
Sure.
something just now. So my familiarity with the words incorporated and unincorporated, for example, I live in Clearwater. So there are parts of Clearwater that they call unincorporated Clearwater. And that means for whatever
Correct.
reason, your address is Clearwater, but you are not bound by Clearwater city codes and ordinances. It's you
Correct.
can have chickens, you can do whatever, you can do all this stuff. And so I've only heard incorporated and unincorporated used with reference to a city. I've never heard it used in reference to a county. But the way you're describing it, you could call unincorporated Clearwater. You could also call that unincorporated Pinellas County. It's the parts
Yes,
of
you could.
Pinellas County that are not part of an incorporated city.
Correct.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
And it has each state creates their own municipal governance system, cities, towns, whatever. Sorry, I'm moving around to make sure I get good internet. Cities, towns, whatever. And so in the state of California, it sounds like the county is the greater governance level. And then below that you have towns, Glendale, Los Angeles, whatever the various towns and municipalities in LA County are. And so just like you would have unincorporated Clearwater, where you have, for example, like you talked about, you have a Clearwater address. The Clearwater post office is where your mail would get delivered from, but it's often not by a letter carrier. It's probably by a rural route mail carrier, either an employee of or a contractor of the Postal Service. You likely, you may be in Oklahoma, for example, if you're unincorporated, you're on rural water. You don't get city water. You don't get city sewer, so most people are on septic. You don't have city trash, so it's up to you to figure out how to dispose of your household waste. Um, a lot of them have fire districts where you pay $50 a year for the fire department to respond to your house because they're not funded. You're not paying a city fire tax or something to access a fire department. So
Right.
that's the parts of LA County that, at least the quick research that I've done indicates that's the part that these proposed legislation is going to affect. And it's also worth noting at this point too, it is simply proposed legislation. It doesn't mean the LA County Board of Supervisors are going to take any action on it. The most recent board action was, we are asking and directing staff to propose something for our consideration that meets these particular requirements. And then it's been handed to staff to do the research, talk with attorneys, and come up with language. So at this point, it's not in place. It's just they're going through the necessary legislative process to at least consider this at a later meeting.
So, for the purposes of this issue, why is the distinction between unincorporated LA County and incorporated LA County? Why is that distinction important?
Well, I don't have a ton of knowledge on California constitutional law specifically, but based on the way the law works generally, if the parts of incorporated LA County have the right to self-governance, the city of Los Angeles can pass any ordinance that it chooses to. But if it is or same thing with Glendale and a lot of the little towns in the Simi Valley and those areas, anytime you have a municipal government, they have the right to adopt ordinances and laws to protect their citizens. But if you live in an area that doesn't have one of those, the county has to come in and cover where there is no additional government to help create policy.
Mhm.
And so if LA County decides, okay, City of Los Angeles, you're going to do X, the City of LA probably already has a policy on that.
Mm.
And so it's more of, we want to make this a front burner issue. We want people to talk about it. We want other municipalities. And that's why they even say, I think in that press release or whatever it was you were reading, I saw your live stream last night, whatever that wherever you were getting that information, wherever you're reading it from, I forget. But it basically says, our goal is that we can begin the conversation with the other towns and cities and municipalities around us. And that was sort of a recognition by LA County that says, we can't make Los Angeles do this. We can't make the Los Angeles suburbs do this. We can only make the 43 people with 2 outhouses and a gas station do this.
Right. Interesting. Now, let me pull up here. There was info sent to me. I'll keep him nameless for now, but some info from Streets LA and some info. I'll just say my friend Dave. So first, let me just see. So yesterday when I was doing my video and I was like, and I was getting a little hung up on the unincorporated versus incorporated. Streets LA texted me. He said, there's actually 2 different pieces of anti-protest legislation being pushed. One that affects LA City, and then there is the same legislation being pushed on the county level that will affect the unincorporated parts of LA County. So moving forward in conversations on this, I'm going to try to specifically focus on what is being proposed for LA City, because that is what is going to affect the protesters. On the county level, my buddy Dave said, let's see, he goes, he said the LA County Board of Supervisors basically invented virtue signaling. He said the whole keep the protesters away from the synagogues and the mosques is nothing more than a symbolic ordinance, which will likely, Zach's buffering, which will likely never be challenged on constitutional grounds because it will likely never happen. They say they're leading the way, hoping that the incorporated communities will follow suit, but they won't because they get the legal challenges in spades. Oh, I see Zach. I'll take you off here and I'll bring you back on here. There you are.
Sorry.
Welcome back.
Like I said, I'm chasing internet. Hang on.
No problem.
Go ahead.
Okay, so anything the LA County Board of Supervisors passes, they won't expect to be challenged, but LA City definitely would. It said, okay, the LA County says they're leading the way, hoping that the incorporated communities will follow suit, but they won't because they will get the legal challenges in spades. The Board of Supervisors can then claim the high ground with 0 potential repercussions. Welcome to Southern California. Okay, now I did, as we were preparing for this video, I did text Streets and I said, is there any specific call of action I should be putting out now with respect to the proposed ordinance in LA City? And he said, not really at this point. There's a very small chance that it will pass because of all of the blowback that has been received. But I can say that Kendrick Moxon bringing it up in court shows that they plan on aggressively using it if it were to pass. So Street says he expects a lot of public debate around this will be focused on preventing protesting of Scientology, more so than it being focused on the Israeli-Palestine protests. It's basically, yes, exactly. So I also, in my chat yesterday, many people were pointing out that Audit LA is pretty much the best source of updated information on this subject. I have sent out an invitation to her to do a chat with me as well on this topic. Is there anything else worth discussing about this for now?
I think it's just one of those that if you live out in that LA area, this is an opportunity to start conversations in your local communities. I don't know, you go straight to your city council member, but if you're involved in community action organizations or anything, it's a great time to have that conversation. But also, it's worth noting too that this legislation, when it's dealing with the limitations of constitutional protections, it has to withstand something called strict scrutiny, which means the government must choose the least obstructive way to convey their message.
Mm.
And they have to articulate how it is minimizing the adverse impact on citizens. And the presumption of strict scrutiny is you can't satisfy it. Very rarely does it satisfy it. So if it's overly broad and not extremely specific, if challenged, any federal court's going to throw it out. And even though this is involving Los Angeles, this is absolutely federal court jurisdiction because it involves something that we call federal question. It's limiting those rights of the citizens to free speech in the First Amendment, which was then in after the 10th, after it was the 14th Amendment, conveyed the rights of the Bill of Rights to all people, not just people in federal litigation. And so, if it's not extremely narrowly tailored, and that's a big phrase that they use, is narrowly tailored, sufficiently narrowly tailored. If it's not extremely narrowly tailored, very strong likelihood that it loses if challenged. And so, even if this gets adopted, it's going to be ripe for lots of First Amendment and human rights and protest lawyers, lots of opportunities for lawyers to get in and make sure that the language is what it's supposed to be. I suspect the first iteration of this is going to lose quickly if challenged.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, we will continue to pay attention to this and see if what developments there are. I mean, Even Streets actually said there's probably a 2% chance that this thing will pass because of all the blowback. So that's good to hear. But it still would be amazing to have a whole bunch of people show up for these hearings and explain that this would be basically Scientology's dream come true. Okay, let's see what we got starred in the comments section, and then we'll wrap this one up. Relatively short. Lydia von Stretchclaw, excellent. Good to see you. Thank you for being here today. Love me some common sense. And we have my good buddy Clearwater George here, surrounded by Scientology. Hello, Aaron and Zach. Keep up the great work with the SPTV Foundation. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, George.
Susan King, a little bit off topic. As an Australian, I believe the First Amendment does not cover us. So if I protest online, am I then restricted or worse? Oh, I don't really know what that means. But you're right. Our First Amendment doesn't cover you. Yeah.
I think she's arguing, if I try to protest remotely, say on the internet, am I protected? It's hard to know. That question hasn't exactly been litigated, but the government doesn't have a lot of interest in limiting speech on the internet unless it poses an immediate terroristic or security threat to the U.S. So protest away.
There you go. Look, it's my good buddy Dave. Says Zach nailed it. Oops, I brought up the wrong one there. Okay, Joey Frakes. Palmdale and Lancaster are outskirts with unincorporated parts with LA County. All right, there you go. James Smith, in British Columbia, if you live outside of the city, it is called regional districts. Cool. Okay.
Very similar concept. Yes, James.
Freebird67. Can you ask Zach what impact a TRO record would have on someone's life? For example, employment. Perhaps would feel differently about certain protesters fighting charges. Just maybe need a rethink. Yes.
It depends on the type of employment. If you're just trying to get an average Joe job, it's not going to matter. Temporary restraining orders are quite easy to get, especially on an emergency basis. Long-term permanent restraining orders are it's a much higher burden to prove. So from an employment perspective, I wouldn't worry too much about a TRO. If you're going into the legal field, the medical field, the education, something that requires a really extensive background check, you may have some explaining to do. But just by virtue of having a TRO, it doesn't directly create an adverse employment opportunity.
Yeah. And if getting a TRO or a restraining order against you would absolutely destroy you professionally, then think long and hard about whether you want to be protesting in a way where you're getting in someone's face or making physical contact with Scientologists. If the juice is not worth the squeeze, then maybe don't go squeezing. That's my opinion. Okay,
I think
Joey
you're right on with that one.
Joey Frakes, probably everything near the Scientology facilities are incorporated. Yeah, I would agree with that. Anna from Canada, lawyer friend Zach is awesome.
Thank you, Anna.
Kathy O'Toole, I don't understand how they are lumping in hospitals and clinics with Scientology. Go ahead. What's your take on this? Uh-oh, he froze. We got a frozen. Oh. I actually think I know the answer on this. They're actually just lumping in protests outside. They're lumping actually churches and abortion clinics together, actually, which is a little ironic now that I think about it. Yeah, not necessarily Scientology and medical facilities, but places of worship, churches, and medical facilities where anti-abortion protesters are protesting. Okay, Reverse YouTube says, does anyone know of an unincorporated district in LA County with relevant Scientology venues? That's an excellent question. I personally am not aware of any, but it's definitely a good relevant question. McMeister Toronto, could this kind of legislation restrict unions from assembly, i.e. hospital workers? As a layman, all I can see is that everything I've seen written about the proposals would lead me to believe that the answer is no. But don't take my word for it, guys. Read a book about it. Sovereign Brehan, having a physical perimeter isn't going to restrict anything other than actively getting in someone's way. Scientology is going to have a harder time than the protesters in sticking to it. That's a very interesting point. Thank you for that. Kenny Adcox says, will this stop protesters from being there? Everything I've read about the proposals would lead me to say almost certainly no, that's not what this would result in. But yeah, thank you for the question. All right, guys, we'll keep it there. Relatively short and sweet. Thank you all for hanging out with me. Stay tuned to much more to come today and later this weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right